Brad Keith Sigmon spent 23 years on death row, his life hanging in the balance until the end. In a brutal frenzy driven by heartbreak and a night of heavy drinking and crack cocaine, he bludgeoned his ex-girlfriend's parents to death with a baseball bat, delivering multiple crushing blows that left them with shattered skulls and defensive wounds. But to grasp how a man could reach such a dark place, we have to step back to the unstable roots that first twisted his path. Hit that like button and subscribe to be part of our growing community. Also, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from as we dive into this chilling story. Born on November 12, 1957, in South Carolina, Brad Keith Sigmon entered a world already stacked against him. His mother, Virginia Wooten Sigmon, was just 17 years old at the time, and his father, Ronnie, was in the U.S. military, a job that kept the family uprooted and on the move. They bounced between small towns like Taylor's and Greer, even spending time in the Philippines with little chance to put down roots. 4 younger siblings arrived in rapid succession, each about a year apart, turning the household into a whirlwind of needs and noise. The real cracks showed when his parents divorced during his early childhood. Ronnie, struggling with alcoholism, turned violent, physically abusing young Brad, who often stepped in to protect his mother from the beatings. This role reversal left deep scars, fostering a sense of responsibility far beyond his years, but also planting seeds of resentment and emotional turmoil. After the split, Brad shuffled between his parents' homes and those of step-parents, facing ongoing emotional neglect that experts later linked to his battles with depression, anxiety, and trouble building healthy bonds. Poverty lingered in the background, with the family scraping by on limited means, forcing Brad to grow up fast. By his teens, he was working jobs to help feed his siblings and keep the lights on, a burden that highlighted his family's struggles, but also pulled him away from normal kid stuff. In the midst of his turbulent youth, Brad Sigmon grasped for something stable, a marriage that promised escape from the chaos. At just 19, in 1977, he dropped out of high school mere weeks from graduation to tie the knot with his wife, whose name remains private in most records, but who became the center of his early adult life. They relocated from upstate South Carolina to the quieter town of Manning, where they started building a family. Soon after, they welcomed a son, and for a time, Sigmon poured his energy into being a provider, working odd jobs to support them. Family members later described him as a devoted father and husband during these years, always quick to help with siblings or parents, his rough edges softened by the responsibilities of home life. But beneath the surface, old demons lingered. His unresolved anger from childhood abuse, coupled with a growing dependence on alcohol that echoed his father's struggles. What started as minor tensions escalated into a volatile mix, raising the question, could love hold back the storm brewing inside him? By the late 1980s, cracks in the marriage widened, fueled by Sigmon's DUIs and deepening personal issues, including emerging mental health challenges like depression and anxiety that he never fully addressed. The breaking point came on November 17, 1990, in a night of raw fury during a heated domestic dispute. Sigmon, driven by jealousy or rage, details vary in accounts but point to a pattern of possessiveness, broke into his wife's home in Manning. What followed was chaos. A shootout erupted, with gunfire exchanged in the confined space. Sigmon took multiple bullets to the stomach, collapsing in agony as blood pooled around him. His 12-year-old son, caught in the nightmare, was struck in the arm by a stray bullet, a heartbreaking twist that scarred the boy both physically and emotionally. As sirens wailed and paramedics rushed in, Sigmon hovered on the edge of death. Would this be the end, or just another scar in a life full of them? Miraculously, Sigmon survived the ordeal. Rushed to a hospital in Clarendon County for initial treatment, he underwent emergency surgery in nearby Richland County to repair the severe internal damage from the gunshot wounds. Doctors worked tirelessly, stabilizing him over days of intensive care, and after about a week, he was released to recover at home. His body mended, but his spirit further fractured. The incident led to legal repercussions, adding to his record, but it didn't break his cycle of instability. In the 1990s, he returned to Greenville County, piecing together a life amid ongoing battles with substance abuse, including crack cocaine, that would later play a role in his darkest acts. Yet amid the ruins, a new chapter beckoned, one that promised passion but hid even greater peril. It was during this Greenville period that Sigmon met Rebecca Barbar, a woman who would become his live-in girlfriend for 3 intense years. Though exact details of their first encounter are sparse, likely through mutual circles in the working-class communities of upstate South Carolina, they quickly fell into a committed relationship, sharing a trailer as their home base. At first, it seemed like a fresh start. Sigmund doted on her, and they built a routine together, with him working to provide while she offered companionship that soothed his loneliness. But dynamics shifted over time. Court records later revealed a possessive streak in Sigmund, marked by jealousy that intensified as the relationship wore on. Rebecca, described as independent, began pulling away, feeling smothered by his clinginess. As the shadows of obsession lengthened in Brad Sigmund's fractured life, a tragic collision course was set for one fateful morning. By early 2001, his 3-year relationship with Rebecca Barbar had crumbled under the weight of his possessiveness and her need for independence. She moved back into her parents' modest trailer home in Taylor, South Carolina, seeking refuge with David Lark, 62, a retired mill worker known for his quiet strength, and Gladys Lark, 59, a devoted homemaker who cherished her family above all. Sigmund, unable to accept the breakup, spiraled into fixation. He stalked Rebecca, lurking near the home to watch her comings and goings, his jealousy festering like an untreated wound. What if one more plea could win her back? But rejection only fueled his desperation, blending with years of unresolved pain from his own abusive past. The night before the horror unfolded, on April 26, 2001, Sigmund sought escape and self-destruction. He spent the evening with acquaintance Eugene Strube, downing alcohol and smoking crack cocaine until the early hours of April 27. In a haze of intoxication, Sigmund confided his dark plan to Strube. Once Rebecca left to drop her 2 young children at school that morning, he would slip into the Larks' home, tie up her parents, and finally get a hold of her. It was a chilling blueprint born of heartbreak and rage. Did the drugs amplify his volatility, or was this the inevitable eruption of a man long teetering on the edge? The timeline of terror began around 8 a.m. on April 27, 2001, in the Larks' quiet Greenville County trailer. With Rebecca gone on her school run, Sigmund grabbed a wooden baseball bat hidden beneath his nearby trailer and forced his way inside. He surprised David in the kitchen, where the older man was starting his day. Panicked, David shouted for Gladys to fetch his gun from the bedroom, a desperate bid for protection that sealed their doom. Sigmund swung the bat with ferocious force, full home run-style blows, striking David 9 times in the back of the head, shattering his skull and leaving him crumpled on the floor. Hearing the commotion, Gladys rushed in, only to be chased into the living room by her daughter's ex-lover. Sigmund battered her relentlessly, delivering 9 crushing strikes to her head as she raised her arms in vain to shield herself, her defensive wounds a silent testament to her final, futile fight for life. But the brutality didn't end there. Sigmund returned to the kitchen, spotting David still twitching in agony, and hammered more blows until the movement stopped. Back in the living room, he did the same to Gladys, who gasped and inhaled her own blood into her lungs during those last excruciating moments. Both victims lingered in unimaginable suffering for 3 to 5 minutes, their bodies hemorrhaging as life ebbed away in the home that had once been their sanctuary. The scene was a blood-soaked nightmare, pools of red staining the floors, the bat discarded nearby, and the air heavy with the echoes of violence. This wasn't just murder. It was a savage erasure of 2 innocent lives, ripping apart a family in an instant and leaving scars that time could never fully heal. How could such ordinary loving parents, pillars of their community, meet such a gruesome end over a failed romance? In the aftermath, with his hands stained by the deed, Sigmund didn't flee immediately. He rummaged for David's gun, loaded it, and waited like a predator for Rebecca's return. When she pulled up minutes later, oblivious to the horror inside, he burst out, forced her at gunpoint into her own car, and sped away in a frantic abduction attempt. But Rebecca's quick thinking turned the tide. As the car slowed near a bridge, she leaped out, tumbling to the ground. Sigmund slammed on the brakes, chased her down, and fired shots that grazed her head and struck her arm, leaving her wounded but alive amid the roadside chaos. With sirens potentially closing in, did a neighbor hear the screams? Sigmon abandoned the scene, ditching the car and vanishing into hiding, his mind racing with the weight of what he'd unleashed. Evidence quickly piled up against him, painting an undeniable portrait of guilt. Sigmund's friend Eugene Strube's testimony about Sigmund's eerie confession the night before provided a clear motive and premeditation, showing this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment act, but a calculated plan twisted by obsession. The crime scene spoke volumes. The baseball bat, traced back to Sigmund's trailer, bore traces of the victim's blood, while the defensive wounds and the sheer number of blows revealed a personal, rage-fueled attack that only someone close to the family could commit. Rebecca's survival added a living witness. She identified Sigmon as her assailant and the man who'd invaded her parents' home. His flight itself was damning, a classic sign of consciousness of guilt, as he evaded authorities for 10 tense days. But in a twist of familial betrayal, his own mother, Virginia Wooten, couldn't bear the burden. She contacted police and helped pinpoint his location in a remote cabin in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. On May 7, 2001, officers swooped in, arresting him without resistance. From the start, Sigmon offered no alibi to counter the damning proof against him. Instead, upon his capture in that remote Tennessee cabin on May 7, 2001, he confessed fully to the murders of David and Gladys Lark, detailing the brutal baseball bat attacks and his failed abduction of Rebecca Berbere. This immediate admission left no space for fabricated stories or denials, as investigators already had Eugene Strube's testimony about Sigmund's premeditated plan, the bloodied bat linked to him, and Rebecca's eyewitness account. Any potential defense of innocence crumbled under the weight of his own words, shifting the battle entirely to the penalty phase, where the real fight for his life would unfold. The trial, held in Greenville County in July 2002, was a gripping showdown between raw horror and desperate pleas for mercy. Sigmon pleaded not guilty initially, not to contest the facts, but to ensure a jury could decide his fate rather than a judge. South Carolina law barred jury sentencing for guilty pleas in murder cases. Once underway, he stunned the courtroom by admitting his guilt outright to the jury, owning up to the 2 counts of murder and 1 count of first-degree burglary. This move bypassed a lengthy guilt phase, thrusting everyone into the heart-wrenching penalty proceedings. The prosecution painted a vivid picture of unrelenting savagery, highlighting aggravating factors like the burglary during the killings, the torture inflicted through repeated blows, and the murder of 2 people in one ruthless scheme. They argued Sigmon showed no mercy to the Larks, who suffered the most horrific death, urging the jury to mirror that lack of compassion with a death sentence. On the defense side, lawyers didn't deny the crimes, but begged for life imprisonment, weaving a narrative of a man ravaged by lifelong demons. They called family witnesses, his son, parents, siblings, stepfather, and aunt, to testify about his loving side, his protective instincts as a child amid abuse, and his good behavior while awaiting trial. Mitigating evidence spotlighted his turbulent childhood, depression, anxiety, and adult battles with alcohol and crack cocaine, framing the murders as a tragic outburst from a heartbroken, impaired soul rather than cold-blooded evil. But could these humanizing details pierce the jury's outrage over the Larks' gruesome end? Or would the scales tip toward vengeance? After tense deliberations, the jury delivered a unanimous guilty verdict on all charges, finding the aggravating circumstances proven and no mitigating ones strong enough to spare him. On July 20, 2002, they sentenced Sigmon to death for each murder count and 30 years for the burglary, a decision that echoed the finality of his bat swings. As the gavel fell, it raised haunting questions. In a system weighing life against death, does understanding a killer's pain ever outweigh the victim's stolen futures? Or is justice blind to second chances? Behind the cold bars of South Carolina's death row, Brad Sigmon's life became a quiet echo of the chaos that had defined him. Housed at the Broad River Correctional Institution in Columbia, he spent over 2 decades, 23 years to be exact, in a stark, high-security environment where days blurred into a routine of isolation and reflection. Death row there meant small cells, limited movement, and constant surveillance, with inmates often confined for 23 hours a day amid the hum of fluorescent lights and distant clangs of metal doors. Sigmon, however, stood out as a model prisoner, earning trust from guards who saw him as a peaceful presence rather than a threat. His record showed no violent incidents since 2009, though he faced minor infractions like disrespect or possessing contraband, with his last one 9 years before his end. He worked diligently to atone, becoming a devout Christian who delved into faith as a lifeline, reading the Bible and serving as an informal chaplain to fellow inmates, offering counsel and support in their shared limbo. Deep remorse defined his time. Family and lawyers described how he expressed penitence every single day for the Larks' deaths, grappling with the weight of his actions without excuses, though his past mental illness, undiagnosed depression, and anxiety loomed as a shadow over his transformation. Appeals consumed much of his years, direct challenges rejected by the South Carolina Supreme Court in 2005 and 2013, federal denials in 2018 and 2020, even a U.S. Supreme Court dismissal in 2021. He fought executions scheduled in 2021 and beyond, citing drug secrecy, mental health failures at trial, and the cruelty of methods, but each stay only delayed the inevitable, leaving him to ponder if redemption could ever outweigh the blood on his hands. As March 7th, 2025 dawned, the day that would end it all, Sigmon woke in his cell at Broad River, facing the solemn rhythm of a condemned man's final hours. He spent the morning in quiet reflection, meeting for 2 hours with his spiritual advisor, Reverend Hillary Taylor, sharing words of faith and sorrow that underscored his changed heart. Visits came from his lawyer, Gerald Bo King, and perhaps close family, though details remained private, offering brief moments of human connection amid the growing tension. His last meal, served 2 days earlier on Wednesday evening to allow sharing, was a simple spread of Southern comfort. 4 pieces of fried chicken from Kentucky, green beans, mashed potatoes with gravy, biscuits, cheesecake, and sweet tea. He'd hoped to split buckets of chicken with other death row inmates as a gesture of camaraderie, but prison rules limited it to his portion alone. By afternoon, preparations intensified. At around 6 p.m., guards led the 67-year-old to the execution chamber, strapping him into a specially designed metal chair with a basin below to catch blood. A black hood covered his head, and a white target with a red bullseye marked his chest. No countdown came, just the sudden crack of 3 rifles fired simultaneously by volunteer prison staff from 15 feet away, their shots aimed at his heart. His body flinched, his arm trembled as if straining against restraints, and at 6:08 p.m., he was pronounced dead, the first U.S. firing squad execution in 15 years. In his last words read aloud by his lawyer, Sigmon urged an end to the death penalty, calling it unjust under the New Testament. Let this be one of love and a calling to my fellow Christians to help us end the death penalty. No one has the authority to take lives except for God. Witnesses, including victims' family and media, sat in heavy silence, a reminder of the profound loss on all sides. In the end, Brad Sigmon's story forces us to confront the shadows of human frailty and justice's harsh edge. Does the death penalty truly heal the wounds of victims, or does it perpetuate a cycle of violence that society claims to condemn? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if this tale gripped you, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into true crime's haunting truths.